Samuel studied every one of Jesse's sons, beginning in age, the oldest, all the way to the youngest. But pretty soon he ran the entire gamut, ran the entire table, and still God didn't point out to Samuel which of Jesse's sons should be considered king. And at that point, Samuel said, Jesse, are these all of your sons? And they said, well, there is one more, the youngest one. But he's so young, he's watching the sheep for his older brothers. And Samuel said, bring the boy to me. Sure enough, after running out to the meadows, coming back, Samuel sees a little red-headed guy with a rosy complexion. God said, that's the one. That's the one. And God told Samuel something very, very important. And we're thinking about harmony and unity, and we're thinking about walking away from conceit and haughtiness. These are words that should ring very clear to us. Read them with me. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. The Lord doesn't look at outward appearances. Not how tall you are, short you are, or how skinny you are, or how heavy you are. Not your color, not your complexion, not your degrees, not your lack thereof. Not your life experience or your lack thereof. Not your success, not your failures. He looks at the heart. He looks directly at the heart. Man, if we could steal a page from God's playbook, that's an important one to do. So I'll put it to you this way. Let's live in harmony with one another. And I know I too have been part of institutions that have diverse amounts of people with diverse amounts of approaches and opinions, and some of those opinions are opinionated. And I too know what it's like to have people get on my channel and get on my nerves and maybe even annoy me. And maybe even put themselves in the not so fond of file. I know what that's like, just like you know what that's like. You might have people in your very own family that belong in that file. But I think it makes a lot of sense to not look at the behaviors that annoy, but instead put our focus on our hearts. That's what God sees. When we do that, it becomes a little bit easier to live in harmony with one another. And let's not be proud, because when we're proud, we elevate ourselves. We elevate ourselves into such a status that we assume that ours is superior, that we're above everybody else. And there's so much that we overlook. We weren't necessarily made to be of that sort of place. As a matter of fact, Jesus had to give that teaching to the Pharisees. When you're invited to a banquet, don't go and assume the seat of honor over there. Assume the seat of least honor. If you assume the seat of honor as the honored guest, and the host comes out and says, I'm sorry, that's not your seat. I have someone more important than you for that one, you're going to be embarrassed. But if you assume the lesser seat, and then the host comes to the banquet and says, here, assume the place of honor, then things go well. It speaks of a disposition to not be proud. Be willing to associate with people of low position. And you know the reason Paul says that? He's talking to people who are speaking from pride and conceit. And I'm going to put a big amen to that. Be willing to associate with people of low position. That means to associate with people that you might not see things the way you do. You might not have a sophistry that you have, or might not see the bigger picture like you do. But they still have perspectives. And those perspectives can be valuable and can mean so much. So be willing to associate with people of low position. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you this. Be willing to associate with people of high position too. Because sometimes we'll walk up to people of high position and be intimidated by them. Or we might even sit there and make assumptions that a person's of high position, they're going to think lowly of me, so I'm going to put a thumb in their eye before they can make me feel bad. And how sad that becomes as well. Our willingness ought to be as such that we'd be willing to associate with people of high position. Let me put it to another way. Be willing to associate with people of all positions. And I'd love to see that happen. I'm going to say some things that might get me tarred and feathered. But I know some people that have some very conservative views. And they assume that they're the true patriots. They assume that they're the purveyors of what true morality is. And thus people who don't see things their way are not patriotic. And people who don't see things their way are immoral. And I have very good friends from the opposite side of the spectrum who understand themselves to be liberal and progressive. They assume that they're the only ones that are smart. The only ones who are intelligent. Everybody else is dumb. And I feel like people that do those kinds of things, by the way, I'd like to think that I have a little bit of above average intelligence. I'd like to think that I'm too patriotic. And a lot of people consider me very conservative. But I think our willingness ought to be as such that we'll not just listen to one another, not just tolerate one another, but to listen to one another and entertain one another and befriend one another. Now you're going to walk away from here saying all Philip did was talk about politics today. Stop that. Don't do that. There's an entire diversity of people out there that if we shun them from our places of exclusivity, then we're turning off a great chance to touch hearts with some other of God's children. And that's why I like to put it this way. Don't be conceited. Don't let your high opinions of yourself isolate yourselves from one another or set yourself up for failure. Be like Jesus instead. By the way, Jesus was accused of several things, but being conceited was never one of them. As a matter of fact, he was accused of over-associating with people. He was accused of being around people he shouldn't have been around. He was accused of going up and hanging out with lepers, the shunned people of society. He was accused of befriending people who were castaways, cast-outs, cast-offs, you name it. He hung out with the sick. By the way, when he hung out with the lepers tended to be former lepers. And when he hung out with the castaways, when he hung out even with the tax collectors, one of the things I noticed is the tax collectors quit collecting taxes. He was a transformer of people. And aren't you glad that he didn't isolate himself, because if he would have, that transforming power would have been removed. That transforming influence would have been removed from the people. So instead, let's be like Jesus. Humble in his approach. And I put it to you this way. We'll be blessed to see what God is doing through others. We'll be blessed to see how God's making a difference in people's lives. We'll be blessed to see what their experience is, how they discovered His grace, how they've seen it applied to their lives, how they once were lost, but now are found. No matter what the diversity, no matter what the difference, we'll be blessed to see what God is doing through others like that. We'll be set up to love one another. And we've heard those words before, haven't we? We'll be set up to love one another. And how important that is. It's the greatest, it's the commandment that is like the greatest ever. Love one another. And so with this in heart, and with this in mind, I open up the altar of prayer for anyone who'd like to come and just spend some time in God's presence. The altar's open as we stand and sing our closing hymn. It's entitled, Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus.